Hello, everyone, and welcome to Groundwater Talk Live. I am the groundwater guy, Tom Ballard, and today we are going over the technical, managerial, and financial requirements for water utilities, part 3. So, this is the third part of our 3-part series where we're going to cover the financial requirements. So hold on, it gets a little detailed here, but what I wanted to do first before we get going here is to ask people to like, comment, share. It helps us beat the YouTube algorithm and gets the word out there. So more people subscribe. We're getting more subscribers, building our subscriber base, and that's great. I think we get some good information out there. So I look forward to getting that out there. If you comment, and I'll have an email address if you want to contact me, but if you comment, I always answer all the comments too. So I appreciate any likes, comments, shares you provide, and it helps us get the word out there. So I appreciate even if you just hit a like, that's great, and it helps us. So. Okay, let's dive in here a little bit. The last couple weeks we covered the technical requirements and the financial or the managerial requirements. Today we're talking about financial requirements. But let's recap a little bit. In case you didn't see the other 2 parts, I got a little summary of what the technical, managerial, and financial requirements really are. So, really, some good instructions are the California TMF instructions. You can find these online. This is what it looks like. And if you're going to apply for funding, this is a great source to look for. It gives you detailed instructions, and so that's a good one to look at. And out of that same document, here is where TMF, documenting your compliance with the TMF requirements, really comes into play. And it's mainly for most people going to be during the funding stage. So in California, where this document is from, is the State Water Resources Control Board. That's the State Revolving Fund funding. You're going to see you have mandatory requirements, you have necessary requirements. Mandatory means you have to have these meet these requirements before you apply. Necessary means you're going to have to meet them in some time frame after you apply. New water systems, change of ownership also have to meet TMF requirements as well. That's a less common occurrence for most people. We do see some consolidations, so that happens with change of ownership. But generally, this is going to be something that you are going to run into meeting these requirements for if you're getting state revolving funds, grants, and loans. So how does it all break down? Technical requirements we discussed a couple weeks ago. They address the utilities infrastructure, regulatory compliance, water quality, and the adoption of technology and innovation. So basically what you need to run your water system. The managerial requirements focus on effective leadership, governance, human resource management, customer service, asset management. Asset management also laps over into what we're talking about today, the financial requirements. And that deals with revenue stability, budgeting, and financial planning, rate setting, financial reporting, and access to capital, all the things you really need to keep things rolling, and where a lot of small water districts really kind of struggle, in my experience. Usually, most people have the technical requirements down, but on my experience with smaller water districts, managerial can be a little bit iffy, and financial tends to be a challenge if you're a small water district, because most people don't have the financial training they really need to manage the financial end of things. So it kind of tends to be bubble gum and baling wire, as we used to say when I was growing up in Montana. So that is the financial requirements. So overall, the TMF guidelines provide a comprehensive framework for water utilities to operate efficiently, and it's really something that most people should be doing anyway. It's really a set of best practices. If you're going for funding, obviously the funding source wants to know that you have your act together, and that's what compliance with TMF really demonstrates that you have your act together and you're going to wisely use the money you get. Uh, but it's really something that should be done every day, is really looking at these things. So I look at them not as just something that you need to meet when you get funding, but something that you want to meet every day. And it just allows your water system to operate more efficiently and make use of the money you have. Everybody's short on capital these days, and so we need to get the biggest bang for our bucks. And by employing a set of best practices like the TMF requirements, you really are going to be able to manage your water utility in the most efficient way and manage your resources effectively. So, and with the ultimate goal of providing a safe and affordable drinking water to your customers. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. You want to keep that water flowing so that people, take it for granted a lot of times. They can go to their tap and turn on the tap, and clean water is going to flow out. And that's what we do behind the scenes, is make sure that can happen. So, and all the TMF requirements are really designed around that. Okay, so today we're talking about the last leg of the TMF requirements, is the financial requirements. And financial requirements, as I mentioned earlier, they focus on revenue stability. We want stable revenue so we can plan ahead. Budgeting, that's part of that process, and financial planning, that's all part of that process. Where are we going? What needs are we going to have down the road? Rate setting, and rate setting is something that challenges a lot of people because all the customers hate to get a rate increase, but your rates really need to match what it costs to operate your water system, plus setting some money aside in capital improvement programs to make sure that you can do the repairs and do any necessary upgrades. And the rates need to reflect that, because that's where most of your cash is going to come from. Even if you get loans, you're going to have to pay those back. Grants, not, but you're still going to have to pay the grant writers and things like that. So that all needs to be built into your rates so you can run things day to day and do the necessary repairs. Things break unexpectedly, and you need to take care of that. Financial reporting, you got to be able to track where you're at, and access to capital. That for smaller water districts, that can be quite the challenges. How do we get access to capital? And I'll have more to say on that as we go along here and get into the details. All right, so breaking things down into, looking at a general look at these different areas. Revenue stability is number one. We'll do a quick overview of these, and then we'll get into the details on each of these. So revenue stability is really about maintaining your financial viability over the long haul. So we need to be able to meet our operating and capital needs. So the day-to-day operations and your long-term capital needs. Do we know in a couple of years we need to put in a new water well, for instance? We need to plan and budget for that. Where's the money going to come from for that? We're going to have to do some design work. We're going to have to locate that well. Then we're going to have to build the well. And then we're going to have to put in, tie it into our distribution system, any treatment that's needed there, any wellhead facilities. That all needs to be part of our plan, and we need to have revenue stability so that we can address those things now and down the road. So this really includes diversifying revenue sources. We'll talk more about this. Managing our customer accounts and implementing revenue protection measures, and we'll get into more detail on that when we dive in on this particular topic. Budgeting and financial planning. We need an effective budget and financial planning process. It really helps us determine, where we're going to need to allocate our resources. If we have any investments. A lot of small water districts don't necessarily have any investments, but we need to prioritize those and also prioritize where we're going to spend our money and maintain fiscal discipline. We don't want to, buying the best furniture in the office and all that stuff, and then shorting our chemical feeds for our treatment system because we had to have really great furniture. So it's a little bit of maintaining your priorities, and for small water districts especially, and I emphasize small water districts because that's really what I work with a lot, and that's really where a lot of these things come into play. Is a lot of small water districts typically struggle with some of these requirements. So I emphasize smaller water districts because that's where we see a lot of challenges. So anyway, budgeting and financial planning involves preparing annual budgets. We want to know what our budget is for the year, and then we want to do a multi-year plan so that we know what's going on, so we can project out. And that's where you're going to tie that into your capital improvement plan. When do we need to have capital available to replace these valves, to upgrade our storage? That type of thing is all part of your multi-year financial plans. And then your capital improvement budgets. We set aside money in our capital improvement plan, and that we can budget for our long-term, bigger capital needs. So that's what's involved in the budgeting and financial planning. Rate setting, this can be a challenging one especially for smaller water districts, because we see a lot of smaller water districts out there that really do not want to raise rates. Consequently, their rates are really not serving them well. They're not bringing in the money they need to properly run their districts, so they're shortchanging things because their rates do not match their financial needs. And so it's really important to understand what your rates are. And if you need to ask for a rate increase, you need to ask for a rate increase. People squawk about it. They always squawk when there's a rate increase. You can pretty well count on that. But they will accept it if it's all justified and you lay it out. And that's where the financial planning comes into play. You present your financial plan to the stakeholders and the customers in the district, and you say, this is what our rates need to be to cover our costs, to make sure that we're providing you the water you need. The water is not free. The treatment is not free. None of this stuff is free. And if your last time you looked at your rates was back in 1950, then you may not be charging enough. And like I say, we're all reluctant to raise rates, and people will always complain that the rates are going up. But if you can justify those rate increases, then that's what you need, because, and obviously we don't want to charge more than we need for our capital purposes, but we want to make sure that we do tie it back to our financial planning and our budgets to make sure that we have the adequate financial resources we need to properly run the district. So a rate study is usually the way this is done. That takes into account your operating costs, the financial wherewithal of the water district, and so there are people out there that actually specialize in rate studies, and a lot of places like different rural water associations in your state may be able to provide you help with that. But it's important that you understand what goes into your rates, and you're charging the proper rate to manage your water system properly, and to give you the financial resources you need. So we'll discuss more about the different components of that here in just a minute. But it's really, really important, and I see failure on a lot of small water districts on the rate setting. It's challenging to do, but you need to understand a lot of things, and a rate study a lot of times will get you where you need to go and give you the justification you need to charge the proper rates. All right, financial reporting and transparency. This obviously is important because most of the time water utilities are going to be organized as a sometimes a private company, but they're all going to have shareholders, stakeholders. You need to be able to report to those people what the your financial condition is. You need to provide transparency in what your numbers are. And once again, if you need to adjust rates, this financial reporting that you're doing is going to provide the justification for that. So having regular financial reporting is very important, and it needs to be communicated back out to your stakeholders and your customers. The financial reports, whatever audits you need to do, and just maintain open communication. Putting it out there on your website is probably a good place. What's our financial condition, and having regular meetings where you report the financial conditions. I mean, really, every meeting of your water utility, whether it's a mutual water company or whatever board meetings, should always include a financial reporting component so that you're open and transparent about what your financial condition is. And if you need to raise rates, once again, that will set the stage for that and provide the justification that you're setting the rates that is justified by your financial condition and where you need to go. So it all works together, but a lot of it just boils down to building the case for the proper rate structure so you can properly manage things financially. It's all driven by money, folks. So you need to know what your numbers are is really what the financial component comes down to. All right. Finally, access to capital. I'll just grab a drink here. Sometimes we don't have, our rates aren't, there, and our capital improvement plan doesn't have enough capital in it for what we need to do. So we need to go out and look at getting loans and grants and whatever funding is available to us in order to do our infrastructure improvements, maintain our infrastructure, expand our infrastructure if we're in a growth area, and maintain our utilities' financial health. So that's where access to capital comes into play. And this is a challenge for small water districts, especially because the funding process can be very daunting. These applications are complex. For one thing, you need to meet all the TMF requirements that we're talking about here in this three-part series to get the state revolving funds, but the application process can be daunting. And so how do you get that done? Well, fortunately, most states have rural water associations that can help with this process. They're going to have some type of assistance. If you're a member of those organizations, they're going to have some type of assistance that'll walk you through that process, discuss what your funding options are, and to help you walk through the process. And so and there are consultants out there that'll do that too for a fee. I would typically, for funding and access to capital, if you're a small water district and don't know where to start, I would go to your state rural water association and start there and ask them the questions and at least get them to point you in the right direction. So that there's an array of grants, loans, and bonds and out there for rural water systems. The USDA, Department of Agriculture, has a lot of programs out there for funding. That's a great source. State revolving funds are another source. Those are probably the two biggies for rural water systems. There are some other ones. There are bank-type bridge loans and those types of things. Kind of a vast array of financial resources. You need to, determine whether you qualify. It is a complex process. There's no way around that. So, but talking to your state rural water association, probably the best place to start to get a good picture of what's available, what you need to do, and start getting everything in order. You want to have all your ducks in a row long before you start the application process, because there's going to be some things you're missing, some things you're going to have, some blanks you're going to have to fill in. It's going to take a while to get everything together for this. So you want to start doing that and understand the process before you actually need the capital. Because once you apply for a state revolving fund loan, for instance, it's going to take a year or two before you get that money. So there's a long time horizon you really need to address here. Um, to get everything together, and so it's important to understand the process, how long it's going to take, and adequately plan for those things. All right, so let's dive into the details on these things. We've covered the I think the five components. Let's see, one, two, three, four, one, two, three, four, five components. So we're going to cover those in a little more detail. We're going to break them down and discuss them in more detail to give you a picture of the financial. And I'm spending a little more time on this because financial is a thing that most small water districts that I deal with tend to struggle with. Then the managerial, and most people have the technical down, like I said. Okay, so the details. So revenue stability, diversifying revenue sources, really having multiple revenue sources besides just your rates and your billing to the customers can be important to help diversify things a little. It's challenging to do this, especially for smaller water systems, but can help reduce financial risk, and it can maintain some stability. We're certainly looking at coming up on recessions thing here, so it's kind of there's going to be some economic uncertainty out there. So we need to look at how do we maintain our revenue stability during periods of economic uncertainty. So user fees, connection charges, grants. There are ways to sell water trucks. Different sources of revenue you can look at, and those are really going to be kind of a unique situation for your particular district, what the opportunities are. I guess, for instance, in California and in some places, selling water to the cannabis growers is a big thing too. So there's a diversity of revenue sources there. So you can look at that, but it is good. We mainly focus on the rates and the customers paying us, but we should look at a few other sources anyway to give us a little bit of stability. All right, so managing customer accounts. So we want to make sure that people pay on a timely basis, because if you have a lot of people, if you let them slide, and you have a lot of people that aren't paying on a timely basis, that can impact your running the utility. So we don't want to have any financial shortfalls. We need to have ways to deal with billing disputes, delinquencies, and these are things that are internal office types of things, administrative type things, but you really need to address them, because if you run into a lot of billing disputes, if you have a weird metering situation we've seen happen sometimes, then you need to address that and take it seriously, address it, get it resolved, so that you got your cash flow coming in. If your cash flow is tied up in a lot of late payments and stuff that aren't being paid, then that's going to affect your ability to run the utility and pay your own bills. So we want to have a good billing system. We want to get those bills out on time. Sometimes having flexible payment options. If there's a seasonality to how people use their water, which there often is in some parts of the country, then billing averaging may be a way to do that too, like they do for heating and cooling, electrical bills. So and for customers that do have financial hardships, how do you deal with that? You need to kind of help them out. So maybe we have some special grants we've gotten that can address people that are having financial hardship, especially if we're in areas where the median household income is below the average. Then there may be some grants out there and programs that we can tap into that'll help customers that are facing financial hardships. Revenue protection measures. So we talked under the technical about leak detection and water loss control. This is a huge deal. I mean, this costs a lot of water utilities a lot of money. or they have leaks that they haven't tracked down. You're losing water, and sad to say, in some areas, we've seen a lot of illegal taps into water lines, and that's all lost revenue. And it costs you money to produce that water and get it out in the distribution lines. And if you're losing it through a leak or an illegal tap, then you need to address that issue. So you need to track those down, and all water utilities should have a good leak detection and water loss control program in place. And there's a whole science to leak detection and tracking these things down, and you really need to address that, because water loss and leaks are lost revenue, and that's revenue that's not available to you to run the waters. You paid to produce that water, and now you're just losing it into the ground or having somebody steal it from you. You can't allow that to happen. So you need to address that as it happens. So that's important, and that's really the biggie. There's some other areas, but really leak detection and water loss control is probably the biggie that most people face in this area. All right, budgeting and financial planning. So annual budgets and multi-year financial plans. So this is, and I kind of talked about this a little bit when we were talking in the general category, but an annual budget and then having a longer term financial plan really helps you allocate your resources effectively for down the road. So right now, this is what we need. This is our annual budget, what we're anticipating spending in over the next year. That should really be the most accurate. You should have that down to the penny and be able to plan that out pretty well. Now, emergencies happen. We understand that, and we need to make provisions for that. But for the most part, you should have your annual budget down pretty solid. The multi-year plan, you're planning out 5 years, for instance. That's going to be a little bit more nebulous. The numbers are not going to be quite as solid, but allows you to plan, because you start thinking about what your financial needs are going to be 5 years from now, 4 to 5 years from now. Then you're going to need to say, okay, we need to start looking at, in the next couple of years, doing a rate increase. We need to look at some grants and loans, some capital access. We need to increase our contribution to our capital improvement plan to address these future needs. So that's where the future planning gets you. Most small water systems not real good at this. Some are. And we've seen some pretty good ones that have it all planned out. But a lot of the really small guys, not real good at this. But it's really, really important to look at what you need down the road, or you could run into some severe trouble. And the worst thing you can possibly do is to go to your customers and say, we need to double our rates right now because we have this big problem that we need to address. And that really just implies that you're not doing things right, and people are suspicious of you, and they may not vote for the rate increase that you need because you didn't have your planning down. So that is important. So, and that's going to be part of your communication too, is showing that you've actually planned things out. So these plans should be based on realistic revenue projections, prioritize our investments such as they are, and whatever our strategic goals are. That's part of your long-range plan. Strategic goals, that's kind of a little nebulous statement here, but if we know we're in an area that's projecting some growth, for instance, then part of our strategic goals is to provide water to so many new houses, so many taps, and then that's going to require that long-term planning. How are we going to pay for these new distribution lines, new source capacity? That's all going to be part of that. We're going to get this additional revenue from this new housing development, but it's also going to require capital investment up front. We're going to need to pay that back. Where's that money going to come from? That is the strategic planning I'm talking about, and that requires a multi-year financial plan. And it's a little easier to do if you're not experiencing any growth or everything's stable in the area, but you still need to look at replacing assets down the road and part of your asset management plan as well. So, capital improvement budgets. This is something that all water districts should have, because you're going to your day-to-day operations are generally going to be covered by your normal budget. So your personnel and usually staff is going to be your biggest component of your budget. You're going to have, obviously, if you have a treatment system, there's going to be some component to that. But generally, most water utilities, staff and personnel costs are going to be the big part of your budget. But there's going to be things we're going to need to provide another 1 million gallon storage tank. So that's going to, we're going to need that in a few years. That's where the capital improvement budgets come in, because you should be taking some money and your rates should be set so that you have a certain amount of money that's planned out that goes into your capital improvement budget and your capital improvement plan, your CIP, you'll hear it called. And so a certain amount of money should be going into that to fund these capital improvements that we've planned for in our long-term plan, right? Our strategic plan and our long-range financial planning. That's what the capital improvement plan is for, is we set aside the money in that for these longer capital investments. And so it's going to be one of those things where you may plan that we're going to put this much money into the capital improvement plan, and then the rest is going to come from a grant or a loan. But that's part of your strategic plan as well. How are we going to capitalize these things? How are we going to finance these things? So that's part of your capital improvement plan. But you should take some of your income from your rates and whatever revenue sources you have. That should be going into the capital improvement plan. The capital improvement budget should be maintained to meet those needs that if you have a proper asset management plan, you're going to need to know when you're replacing assets, and major assets should, if it's just a valve, that can be, part of your normal operating budget. But if you need to do some major capital improvements, then that's what the capital improvement plan is. And you need to budget that out and then set aside the money for that. So it all works together. Rate setting, cost-based rates and rate studies. This is what I was talking about earlier. You need to make sure your rates generate sufficient revenue to cover your expenses. And also, not only your expenses, but to put some money aside in that capital improvement plan that we just talked about. And in order to do that, you need to understand what your financial needs are going to be, and that's part of that strategic plan and your long-range planning. Are our rates going to be adequate to address our day-to-day needs, plus the money going into the capital improvement plan? Any adjustments we need to make for emergencies? There needs to be some contingency funds in there, and the rates all need to address that. They need to be adequate, and as I've said several times here, everybody hates a rate increase. Your customers will always grumble, but if you can justify it by having the proper financial backing and justification, then certainly you can make the case for that and get it approved. So, and you don't want to raise rates excessively, or unnecessarily. So you need to justify your rates, that's important to maintain the trust of your stakeholders. Affordability and conservation objectives. This is just kind of more of a nebulous one. I throw this in here. Affordability and conservation objectives is kind of a tough one to really pin down. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but it means, maybe you're implementing tiered rate structures for different water use, for to help some of the lower using customers, offering assistance program for low income customers, so making it affordable to them, and like I said, if you're below, there are access to capital is one of those things that if your average household income is below the median, then you have access to more grants for some of these types of programs. If you're above that, then you may have to self-fund that, but surely it's worthwhile to make sure that your low-income customers can afford their water, and so you need to make provisions for that. So, and promoting water efficiency, we want to make sure that water isn't being wasted. Out west, in the Midwest and out west, we've seen drought conditions, and water efficiency is really, really important. We're tapping into, in a lot of parts of the country, we're tapping into groundwater and pulling it out a lot faster than it's going back into the ground due to some of these droughts. And so we're depleting our groundwater resources. We need to make sure that our water use goes as far as possible, and not being inefficient in our water use. And that's where the water loss prevention comes in as well. Now there's kind of a little juggling act here between setting rates and using less water. So you have to maintain the capital flow. So it may be that you need to adjust your rates accordingly. And so that doesn't make people happy. So, well, if we use less water, then our rates are going to have to go up. And it's kind of like, yeah, but we think about the future here. So that's a conservation objective. So that's that component. All right, financial reporting and transparency, regular financial reports and audits. So let's start with the financial reports. They are basically just you're reporting back to your stakeholders, and it provides transparency. You got your financial reports out there. You've done your financial reports on a timely basis. You're reporting that back to the stakeholders. You're providing accountability. How are we spending the rates, or the money we're getting from the rates and the customers? How are we spending that? And so that's providing some accountability back to our stakeholders as well. So that financial reporting is saying that we're using the money wisely to provide clean and efficient water, and planning for the future as well. So audits a little more challenging, but there should at least be a basic audit done to assure that the financial records are accurate, in order, and in compliance with regulatory requirements. There are some regulatory requirements besides just accounting standards, and an audit is going to assure that you're meeting those standards now. Now, there's different levels of audits, and so just a basic audit is usually okay for a small water district, but it provides an outside look at your financial reporting and making sure you have things right. So it's good to do that, and once again, it provides some transparency because you have an outside opinion from somebody that you're doing things right. So that is important. All right, a little bit of a technical hiccup there, but we're on to financial reporting and transparency, open communication with customers and stakeholders. So this is really important because if you are a small utility, you're going to have your stakeholders, who's mainly going to be your customers, but there may be other stakeholders, banks, or any other stakeholders you might have. So you're going to have board meetings. You're going to have the public come. They're going to be able to comment. You really want to be able to have open communication with your customers and stakeholders, mainly about the financial matters, because that's what everybody's worried about. And we've kind of harped on rate setting here during this session, and that is important because if you do need to go for a rate increase or adjust your rates, then by being open with your customers so they know what's coming, then that's going to be really important to build that support that you're going to need. So, and plus you want your customers to be involved. You don't want to have an adversarial relationship with everybody. So it's important that they're involved. They understand because really they're putting their trust in you because you are their water system and you are providing clean water and they're paying you to do that. And so they need to know that you're going to have the financial wherewithal, that you're spending the money wisely in order to keep providing them with that service. So a lot of times, utilities will put their financial statements on their website, but certainly they should be shared in board meetings that the public's invited to so that people can see and comment on the financials. And part of the audits we talked about, that's part of getting an outside opinion so that they know that your finances are right and you're not doing anything wrong. And that's just a good backstop anyway, so that you know that things are going right also. So all right, so moving on to access to capital, funding sources, and credit ratings. So this is our last section. We got a couple topics here we're going to talk about here in our last section. So really understanding what your funding sources are, and then your credit rating is going to be very important. Do you pay your bills on time? And that's going to help you qualify. If you need to go for a loan, then that's really going to help you qualify for that and even for a grant. So this is where I advise talking to your state rural water association. They're going to have the information you need on what programs are available. If it's USDA, US EPA, a state revolving fund, and what all the requirements are for those things. Do you qualify? There's certain funding sources that are available if you're in an area where the median household income is below the average. And so that's the stuff you need to know. And they can help you get that information because you're going to have all that together before you apply for your funding sources. So you need to know what your various funding sources are, what you're going to qualify for, what your specific needs are. I mean, if you're replacing a tank as opposed to putting in a new well, there may be different funding sources available for that. So that's just something you need to explore, and you need to understand what the funding sources are and what you need to do to qualify for those, and to make sure that you have your credit rating there so that you can qualify for that funding. All right. So our last one here, access to capital, grant and loan programs. So once again, this is where your rural water associations are going to be helpful to you. There's a little bit of overlap here between what we were talking about before, but there are grant and loan programs offered by federal, state, and sometimes even local agencies. There's sometimes special funding available. This is the stuff you need to know, and you may need to get financial assistance. You may need to hire a grant writer, or you may need to. There are a number of consultants out there that will put together the application for you in exchange for being able to do the work. So that's a little trade off there, but it can be valuable because winding your way through doing grant and loan applications can be fairly complex, tedious, and if you don't have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, then it can hold up your funding application and it just becomes a nightmare. So knowing what you're doing is really important. So um, anyway, there's a variety of funding programs available for financial assistance for infrastructure, and that's the big one that everybody thinks about. But also, there is funding available for putting together emergency response efforts. And also, there's some funding available. Currently, there's the rural water associations are offering these internship programs. That's workforce development. So getting somebody in there through these internship programs can provide you with that valuable staff you're going to need down the road. So they're getting the proper training. There is funding available for that, so you can get assistance for that. So there is money out there. It's just knowing where to find it, and that is important. Okay, Okay, so that is the financial requirements. In conclusion, we really need to, and financial is probably the most challenging for the small water systems, as I've said repeatedly here. But it is an important component because you have to know how your money is being used and how much money you're going to need down the road, so you can provide for your financial needs. It doesn't do anybody any good to keep your rates low and not have the money you need to properly operate your system, so that things are constantly breaking because you're not replacing that valve. You're trying to nurse it along, and then it breaks, and you're losing water to an entire pressure zone. That doesn't do anybody any good, and then you get complaints. You need to have your rates keep up with things, and you need to properly spend your money, and make sure you have enough money to do things. And that's the challenge of the financial, and the planning part is challenging. Is projecting the future is always iffy, but you got to do it, and usually there's a basis you can do that on. And if you think about it and think it through, what you're going to need down the road, and plan for that, have a proper capital improvement plan, then that's going to give you the revenue stability that you need, and the financial resources you need as you get to those points down the road. And then you need to keep updating those plans. You got your long-term plan, you got your 5-year plan, you got your annual budget, and then you have your 5-year projections. You need to keep updating that every year and extending it out and looking at what you need. Tie it back into the asset management plan, because we know when these assets need to be replaced based on our asset management plan. Now your capital improvement plan is going to provide for that. Your budget's going to provide for that. And so it all ties together, and you can see how the technical, managerial, and financial requirements all work together to provide the water district with the best management practices they need to deliver the clean, safe water that is our goal, and to keep doing that over time, and that stability over time, so that people know when they go and they turn on their tap that fresh, clean water is going to come out, and they don't even have to question it. We've seen too many parts of the country where people turn on their tap and brown water comes out. We don't want that. And by implementing all the TMF requirements and maintaining those as best management practices, not just when you go and do the financing, but day to day, that's going to assure that people can go turn on that tap and they can count on the water to be there when they need it. All right. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this has been informative. You can reach me at tballard@groundwaterguy.com, or leave comments on YouTube or LinkedIn videos. I'm always happy to answer the comment. I always answer the comments, and we will. And so post them up there, like and share. Like I said, that helps us get the word out there. So I appreciate it. So. If you want to be a guest on Groundwater Talk Live, you can go to our Book Me page, and if you have a topic that is of interest to the groundwater community, the water resources community, I'd love to have you on. So that's where you can book that. We stream on the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel, and all our past shows are on there as well. We got 80 some videos up there right now. Also stream live to LinkedIn every Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And so you can catch us either of those places. If you want to look at the past videos, then the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel is the place to go. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel. Hit the bell if you want to know when we have new shows up there, new videos. So that is the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel. Thanks so much, and I will see you next week.